Oh, cool. Well, let's get started. I know I'm looking forward to this. I don't want to talk about everything that we got for the podcast, but I am here with Chris Burdick, goalie himself out of Delaware, starting a program in Florida. We'll get into that MLL experience, championship with the Bayhawks. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, Damon. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, this is going to be tons of fun. You know, the first time I met you in quotation marks was a YouTube video that really clicked with me. It was like way back when you were coaching at Providence, and I don't know if it was like a camp or what you were doing, but you know, it was one of the only things on YouTube that just really broke down the save movement in such a clear and concise manner, and that really clicked with me. So thank you for putting that out there, and thank you for, you know, there's other instructional videos that you've done that I really love. So thank you for putting those out there.
Yeah, man. I'm glad you were able to find that. That's an archive beauty. But yeah, that was a camp we ran at Providence, and when we do our goalie teaching, Rob Chambers, who was a goalie for me at Providence, was part of that staff, and we've gone and done things out in Oregon and Washington. And you know, the save technique, the way we break it down, is a little bit unique. It's a piece and part of everybody that I work with. I used to work a lot with Charlie Toomey in the summers doing the 205 camps. He and I would be down with the goalies, and we would always grab one goalie afterwards and we would just work them. I remember John Tillman, we used to like talk a lot about different, you know, goalie techniques and just how we break it down. And I felt Charlie Toomey was one of the guys that like really connected with me on how he does it. And so from there, I kind of pieced together just what I call straight line save technique theory. And it's really about efficiency of movement, trying to create the straightest line to the ball that you can create for your lead hand. And that's kind of what that video is really all about.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you talk about is like, let's not think about saves as like, you know, stick side high, off, you know, the different quadrants. Let's think about it, because when that shot's coming at you at 100 miles an hour, you don't have time to be like, which one of those 7 saves is it? Let's think about it as one save, the shot coming at you. And so my top hand goes straight to the ball, regardless of where it is. And so I really like that. And then, you know, the lead step cuts off the shot to get my body behind it. And I really like that simplistic way of thinking about the save.
Yeah, and I think that's the way we built the save. We built the save in 2 pieces. So you've got the lead unit, which is basically what stops the ball. Then the trail unit is your control unit. So your bottom hand and your trail step, really designed to control the ball. And one of the things we ask goalies to do is go back and watch your film. And if you do this and break a goalie down, pause the film right at the point of contact, right when their lead hand connects with the ball. And you'll see that only the lead units move. Their lead step and their lead hand are the only 2 things that have actually initiated at that point. And so from that, the save piece, we built drills that basically just teach the save piece. And then we built drills that really build the control piece. So by breaking the save down into those 2 components, it kind of makes it a little easier. I know there's a lot of different philosophies out there about how the lead hand and control hand are supposed to work, how the lead step and the trail step are supposed to work. But when you break the save down over a time scale, and that's what my master's degree was in at Delaware, was basically breaking down the save. That's what I did a lot of with imagery and a lot of sports psychology stuff under Bob Schillinglaw that I'd learned through my degree, but also breaking down the save and basically learning the different components of the save. And that's really, when you look at the save, you've got from the initiation of the stimulus, and that's where goalies get guessing. So you have pre-stimulus cues. So I'm seeing how the stick is starting to unravel in the shot, and that may trigger me to basically to move pre-stimulus, and which we all call guessing. Right. But really, it is basically, it's a false identification of stimulus. You're starting to see something, you're starting to move before the actual stimulus is available for you to be able to evaluate. So, you know, I take that and I break it all the way down into a actual initiation of movement. And so now response initiation error is the idea of being able to respond in the inappropriate way, or a choice response task, stepping in the wrong direction, because in your save, you're basically broken in half. So you're leading with your lead step, whichever side of the body that ball is shot to, your lead step changes. So if it's on my left side of my body, I'm stepping with my left foot. If it's on the right side of my body, I'm stepping with my right foot. So we bringing the save through that time frame, watching the timeline, I got into really evaluating at what point is the trail unit moving.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started realizing that the trail unit doesn't really move until after the save has actually been conducted. You've actually made contact with the ball, or you've intercepted the point of the shot.
Right.
And so we broke the save down in those pieces.
I remember hearing you say that exact thing. And I looked then at a picture of me making a save, and I'm like, he's right. Like the only thing, like my hands have moved, my lead step has moved. And that's, I mean, you could see my back, like I'm firing off of that trail leg. Right. But yeah, you're definitely right about that. Where can we see that research, that master's that you did, or was it like a thesis?
It's not published.
Not published?
But
Okay.
most of the paper is written on the use of internal perspective imagery and goaltending in terms of how it leads to goaltender confidence. My goalies at Delaware, we ran through this study, and we basically had video. Back then, we just basically shot balls at a plexiglass and filmed it. Now you have GoPros and stuff that you can put on and have. But what it was the idea was that we can get the goalies to identify the stimulus at a lower state of anxiety, because they're sitting and watching a video. They're not actually in the cage, and it allowed them to focus on the release point. And we were really attacking that initiation response and the errors that occur in our response. And that was kind of really what we were focusing on. The study was interesting because we found a couple things. One, they felt like they were able to better identify the stimulus accurately by being able to watch those videos. However, watching the videos impacted their internal perspective imagery. So imagery, when you do mental imagery, you can do it as if you're watching the game, watching yourself play, almost like on a TV, and watching, or you can watch it through the eyes that you're playing with and actually see what you're seeing. And so that's what we call internal perspective imagery. And so that's what the case was on. And basically what we found is that the video impeded the athlete's ability to use imagery, because when they close their eyes and they started using their mind to recreate the save and recreate the shot and the stimulus, they were only able to see what they saw on video. So it was kind of interesting how we increased their confidence in their ability to be able to feel like they were able to identify stimulus sooner, but we lost the ability to basically use imagery because we couldn't identify it. Like, we're getting prepared to play Towson, we couldn't see the Towson jersey, we couldn't see, and that type of stuff that we tried to do with them. So it was an interesting study, but I think it led me down the road of, and I didn't do biomechanics at Delaware, but biomechanics was a big major at Delaware. And Andy Shea, who's the head coach at Yale, who grew up with me in Cortland, New York, we played at Cortland High School together. Andy, when I left Delaware, I brought Andy in out of Mooresville and said, Andy, I told Shills he had to hire Andy. Andy then did the biomechanic major. And so I kind of learned a little bit through him, just how much that really, and I think that's really what we need is, with the little balls on every articulation and seeing how the joints move. And that's what led me to a lot of the things that you see in videos. If you go down the line in those videos, you'll find some YouTube videos on wrist rotation. And just, that's the thing that changes, as we talked about at the beginning of this podcast. The thing that changes from having different saves to different quadrants and having one save to every quadrant is basically the way the wrist rotates to the ball, depending upon where the ball is shot. And that's how your stick rotates. So when you do the drill where you're, tossing a ball at the goalie and they're just stepping and they're catching the ball, that is really designed to teach their wrist the correct rotation to get to those different save points. And so as we talked about lead hand, lead unit, the lead hand driving to the ball, it's the wrist rotation that really changes where the stick rotates, so that you're not really making a save circular. You're making it on a straight line, but the stick is still rotating because that lead hand the wrist is rotating the stick.
Yeah. Love it. I was going to ask a question about the stimulus. And that's kind of an interesting thing to have goalies, see those shots in like a very low stimulus environment, because when you're in a game for any age, any goalie, like it's a very your adrenaline's going, you're feeling it. And a lot of youth goalies, like when they're starting out, like, let's be honest, you're scared of the ball. Right. So the shot comes and you're like, you're not making that movement. You're like, head goes down, your knees buckle, and you still see it at college levels, even, it's a natural reaction. How do you coach, or what would you say to a kid trying to overcome that?
The coach is really the most important piece of the youth goalie. And that's one of the things I coach with True Lacrosse here in Tampa. We started a program last year and now we're in our second year of it. And with our younger goalies, the coaches I remind them constantly, the practice and the warm up is going to be everything. They're not going to reproduce what we're doing in practice right away. They're going to be in that mode where they're, shelling a little bit, or they're kind of flinching, or they're guessing, or they're, in live game. It's going to take a long time for what we're doing with them in their muscle memory and their warmups to really take hold. So that's the most important piece of dealing with young goalies, is being patient and recognizing they're going to grow out of that as they start to get the muscle memory down in their warmups. So just keep warming them up, keep working with them, use tennis balls when necessary for in type things so that they're not getting shied away from the ball. Eventually there'll be a point in time when you'll start to see the transfer into gameplay, and it takes a while. You have to be very patient with it. Some people are like, well, if he's afraid of the ball, why is he in the goal? Well, at the 12U level, there isn't really anybody who's not afraid of the ball. So you could put any guy in the cage and they're going to be, there's a couple fearless guys, but those are kids who also been playing probably since they were 6, 7, 8 years old. So they still have about 4 years of experience. So it takes time, and that's the biggest thing. The coaches just keep working with their muscle memory and the warmups, keep them doing things the right way, make sure that their lead step and their lead hand are going to the ball, that they're bringing the trail step through. Make sure that you're working with them without the stick as much as I can. In that video, I think I talked about how the stick is basically the evil of the save, because the stick is what creates all of our rotation movements, all of our circular hand movement. So as much as you can do with, and I love a drill with high school goalies where we just hammer the ball at them, but they don't have a stick. So they're actually catching the tennis ball full speed and playing full speed. And then what we do is we put the stick in their hand, put them in a lead hand situation with no backhand, no control hand. And then we just use the lacrosse ball and we just have them constantly making their saves with that lead hand. It takes away dipping. It takes away a lot of the circular motion to the off stick hip. It creates a much truer path and straighter and efficient path to the ball. But going back to the youth goalie, that's the most important thing, is we just muscle memory, how they play in games, when they make saves, get them fired up, when they get scored on, short memory, move on, next thing. That's really, I think, the important piece of the youth goalie.
Yeah, that's been my answer as of late too, is just reps. How do I get rid of that flinch or being scared of the reps? And that's kind of what you're saying as well. And good quality reps, right? Not bad reps, but good quality reps and patience, reps and patience.
Patience.
Love that drill. So you're just using your top hand. Maybe you've got an attack stick and you're just taking shots, and that really forces you to go, be efficient with your movements, right? Top hand straight to the ball. Cause now it's obvious. Like if there's a shot to my off stick side, it's pretty obvious that I'm not going to go,
That's exactly the point. Yes.
In a U motion to make that save. So I really like that one.
Yeah. And so what we do is we break the save down, and then we basically drill each piece of it. So we have lead hand, lead step. All right. With no control hand. And then we go with lead hand, lead and trail step. So no control hand still. And then we'll do control drill, where we'll basically sit, no feet. And now we basically just use our hands, and we work on that bottom hand pop, because we don't want the top hand to give. We want the top hand to drive through the save, but we need the stick to make that motion. And the way we get that motion is by having that bottom hand pop. So we drive and pop. The wrist rotation is really important with the feet not being able to move. And people will watch us warm up goalies and be like, how come you don't want your goalie to step? I'm like, it's a drill. It's not, we're trying to control. And the other thing is, because you can't step, that off stick save, you're reaching, and now you're getting full extension. And that's one of the things, when you go to college practice, you'll hear probably more than anything from the goalie coach, extend. Lead hand extension is such a big part of the save, especially at the college level, getting that lead hand to extend and drive to the ball and drive through the line of the shot. So make sure that you're not, because you don't want to pull it's like a sprint. I'm not going to slow down to the 40-yard sprint. Am I going to slow down and stop on the 40, or am I going to explode right through it? I'm going to have a better time if I explode right through it. It's the same thing with the lead hand and the save. We've got to explode through the point of contact. We can't stop at the point of contact and give. So the way the stick moves, if we punch the bottom hand, the give motion will happen with the head of the stick, even though the top hand is still driving. So that's, breaking the save down. And then we do a control step drill. And this is a drill, Notre Dame did this when Jerry Byrne was there. they had this with a football, they did it, but we do it just pipe to pipe drill. So we basically create twice the cage, put them on a pipe, have them flat on the goal line. And now I'm driving and getting my trail step through. I've got twice the cage to cover. So my trail step has to come. So lead hand, lead step, lead hand, lead and control step, control hand drill, and then pipe to pipe basically is for trail stepping.
But the pipe to pipe, they're just set up on one pipe and they make a save on the other pipe.
Yeah, we just create twice the cage basically, so their feet have to, and that's really good for goalies that don't have good feet. If you're not driving through, if they're not able to get a good balance step off of their first initial, because your footwork, you've got one step footwork, which a lot of goalies have to grow out of, and then it becomes one step, and it's the same concept. We have to drive through the save, so that first step goes, and then there has to be trail step. There has to be some type of balance at the end. So when you see goalies drive through and kind of almost like a little shuffle at the end, that's them getting their balance back after driving through the save. Any goalie that one steps and brings a trail step, they're not getting through the line of the shot at full speed because they're actually slowing down and making the save at the same time. So the trail step drill allows us to be able to get that trail step really coming. And it's a vector game. Your lead step vector, the direction that it goes to intercept the line of the shot, trail step has to move on that same vector. A lot of goalie coaches say toe to heel, keep your hips square. But it's really, that's about the vector that your feet move. If your lead step goes in one vector to intersect the line of the shot, and then your trail step starts going in a different direction, then you basically stop movement to the shot and you're starting to kind of go in a different direction. That's why goalies' hips turn away from the shooter. So, people say keep your hips square. People say, toe to heel. But the idea is that those steps have to move in the same vector because it needs to keep your momentum going through the interception point of the shot. And that's what that pipe to pipe drill will help work on.
Love it. With in that video, you sort of preach a 45-degree step, kind of attacking the ball, which I do too for youth kids. I think it just gets them in the right mindset. A lot of goalies now take a lateral step. What is your approach?
There's a couple things on goalie play that I think I'm a little different on. The first one is the most direct line to the intercepting point of the shot is really important. So we'll shoot on goalies where we shoot to their shoulders, that line, shoulder, knee, and we want that step to be a lot more vertical. In other words, I want to step to that line of shot. I want my interception point to meet that line of shot. If the shot's a little wider, I open my step, and if the shot's really wide to the pipe, then I should be much flatter. So that's kind of the way that I teach it, because I'm teaching a straight line theory. So I need to get straight line to the interception point of the shot as fast as possible. If the shot is wider, then my step has to be flatter. So we don't really subscribe to the 45-degree theory. I think in youth, yes, we will do that because it's easy to understand. Right. But as we start to get more developed with goalies and get them into the college game or even the pro game, it's so important that our step is designed to take our lead hand to the shot, and that shot coming at a different angle is going to create a lead step angle that's going to be a different width. So it's either going to be, if the shot's right at me, I'm stepping right at it. Yeah. If the shot is a little bit wider, about 45-degree angle is probably good. And if the shot's going to be right on the post and I have to flatten out, I have to get my lead step across the line of the shot. So if it's a wider shot, that's a wider step. If it's a narrower shot or, coming more at my body, that step can be a little bit sharper. But that's really the way that we look at it. So there's no real easy, steadfast rule other than get your foot across the line of the shot.
Yeah. The other thing that you broke down really easily that I really loved was the stance. And it was like, there's a lot of nitpicking about, well, do hands go here? My feet are here, this, that, all of these different elements that go into a perfect stance. And the video that I saw, you're like, let's throw all that out. Let's put my hand in the middle of the cage and bring my body up to support it athletically. And as long as you're like respecting that rule, and I still use that with kids to these days, as long as you're respecting that rule, you're going to have as good of a stance as I think you said, as anyone. So you still coach that way?
Yeah, 100%. And the thing about stance, and this is the really most important thing, is it's about how you're coiled. If you're coiled and drop down, in other words, if your knees bend down and you're straight up and down, then you're coiling your body to explode upwards. And goalie isn't really a jumping position. It's more of a kind of attacking forward position. So the most important thing about that athleticism is your body needs to be coiled and leaned in the direction that you need to move to save. So drawing a line between your shoulder, your knees, and your toes that is lean forward is usually a good general principle as a goalie coach to look at if you're goaltender. The other thing is, it's just like squatting. If you want an explosive squat, you break your hips first. And that's the big thing getting into your ready position is, getting in that athletic stance, having your hips break first so that you're built to go forward. If your knees break first, then you're basically coiling down and getting yourself a chance, basically looking to jump. What that'll do is it'll create the need for you to be able to reset yourself as the ball is being shot. And so it takes time away. Same thing with width of stance. You've got goalie coaches that have these really wide stances, which I understand and I appreciate. The problem is from point of center, if I'm stepping to the ball with my left foot, however further my right foot is from line of center, that limits how wide my stride is. My stride is only so wide, so it limits how many inches I can get to the ball. So bringing feet closer together gives me more stride on ball side, but then it also might not give me enough push. So then the false step starts to happen. So goaltending, a lot of it has to do, and when it comes to the ready position, it's really about trying to design something that can be true to the stimulus. In other words, I don't have to change what I'm doing to be able to react to the stimulus at my quickest and best, most athletic maneuver. So while I give them general principles, get your hand, because I need to drive my hand straight to every quadrant of the cage, starting in the middle of the cage is really important for me. But then also when it comes to width of step, that's going to change based upon what I'm seeing in terms of how they react. If they're false stepping, then I feel like their feet are too narrow. If they can't get their foot across the line of the shot, their feet may be too wide. And that's stuff you with goalies, you mess with that stuff for forever. As a goalie, I don't think I ever played, 2 seasons where I had my feet the same width apart. It always changed based upon what my hiccup was.
Interesting.
Like chasing that. You're chasing that one inefficient thing you have, and it's like a disease. It just keeps going around you. It's like catching your own flu. You're my lead hand's dropping, or I'm false stepping, or I'm not getting my hip square through the save, or it's constant. It's like the art of motorcycle maintenance. The book. You have to learn how to fix yourself as a goalie, and that's the other thing. Goalies have to watch film.
100% agree. 100% agree. Yeah. Yeah. And, any sport of repetition, like making the save is, it's a movement of repetition. Like it's so easy to get off, like, baseball players talk about like getting off in their swing, or pitchers getting off in their wind up. The film really brings it out, and not just watching film of like the bad moments, but like also when I'm playing my best, like this is what I'm doing. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. And baseball is a good example because you got 2 batters. One comes up, he's got a really close stance. Next guy comes up, is a really open stance. And it's like, well, aren't they both trying to hit the ball?
Right.
But they both have something in their mechanism that stance is countering. And that's kind of the way I think goalies need to look at it, is your stance, your general principles of your stance are really kind of consistent across the board. But then it's like how you move, how you react, what your body type is. The wingspan is a big part of goaltending. Like having long arms and long legs. If you have those things, then you have the ability to do some things different than a goalie that doesn't have so people talk about height of goalie, and they talk about playing your arc and stuff. And I don't really subscribe to that. I think, what your wingspan is, what your ability to get across, certain paths of the ball, that's how he's going to determine where you're ready position. I think from position, not to get in a whole nother subject, but position wise, I think I call it the floating arc. I think your positioning should change based upon situations. If you've got a 4-on-3 break, you should be a lot tighter to the goal line because you're going to move a lot. They're going to hit the point guy down the side, maybe cross cage. You need to be tighter to the cage. If you got a guy shooting on the run, we use a pivot position, where as you start to break out of the center, we ask you to pivot first and then move, so that you basically, that pivot step holds you and keeps you behind the shot. Same thing coming around the cage. I like goalies to be square with shooters coming around the goal. A lot of goalies like to be on that kind of that 45 where they're kind of playing a little bit angled. You're giving the shooter more cage. I'd rather be square. And then as he starts to get that step, and this is something that Phipps and I worked on a lot, getting ready to play against Lee. Denver used to run this counter, and Lee would come off the counter and basically just shoot right back pipe. And so, Phipps was getting ahead of him. So we just slowed him down by pivoting as he came across. And a lot of 2-man game gives you this look, this across the top kind of look. and he would pivot and sit, and Lee would shoot it right back, basically right at his right foot.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many pieces of the game that, I mean, you learn watching these top guys, like Phipps and those guys.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like, it's like I'm warming Phipps up for a game, but it's like, man, I'm learning from Phipps every step of the way. This guy has forgotten more about goaltending than I think anybody out there has ever known. And he knows it all. He knows every part of what works for him, but he also can look at other goalies from scouting reports perspective and pick them apart. And he's just, a fantastic lacrosse mind.
Yeah.
Phipps.
Yeah. I've had him on the podcast, and he also presented at this event that I did. And he's awesome, and loves to give back to the game too. I mean, as I'm sure you do, that's kind of like a cool thing about lacrosse is it's given us so much that like this is our gift back to it, which is great. I was going to ask you a question about, the hips firing. You mentioned kind of that's like the first movement. Like, are there drills that you do, with youth, or, how do you kind of coach that if you don't see it happening in a goalie?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One, it's just like your basic movement in the goal. You're like doing a one-step shuffle. That's really kind of a good way to illustrate it with young goalies. So if you push, a goalie to be able to do that multiple times, it's like overtraining. So we have a drill we do where we have the goalies basically do their step, and then they shuffle while they're also extending. So we call it 3-step shuffle drill. That's a drill that really, I think, does a really good job of helping goalies kind of learn how to fire their lead step through. There's also the 1-step drill that we just talked about, the lead hand, but doing it, your save technique with just one step. And that's good for your initiation of movement and getting that choice response down.
Yeah.
Those are 2 drills that we do, I think, that are really important to help the goalies kind of get their hips through. But, it's just like anything else. You can just, if you just take the movement and try to find a way to maybe overtrain it a little bit, that's a good way to drill it. So, if you want to get stronger, you bench. If you want to get faster, you work on your hip, flexor movements. You work on your explosive step. You work on box jumps. You work on all these things to get faster. It's the same thing in the goal. I mean, it really has a lot to do with just your athletic performance and your ability to move. The thing we see with a lot of youth goalies is you got a guy who's not quite as athletic, so he's the goalie.
Yeah.
You're starting the wrong way, because really it should be the most athletic kid that you put in the cage, because it literally is the most athletic position on the field. If you think about it, the speed at which you have to initiate movement and get to a spot is second to none in the game of lacrosse, with the exception of maybe the face-off X. Mm-hmm. And even at the face-off X, you can have a guy with really quick hands and not great feet. In the goal, you can have really quick hands, but if you don't have quick feet to go along with it, you're gonna max out at some point. So, I think that's kind of a piece of that, and especially for the young kids, jump rope, like just little things that we all know work. Very important, box jumps, line jumping, anything you can do to create athletic movement is really important to the progress of your goalie.
Yeah, love it. So kind of jumping into your career a little bit, you were the head coach of the Providence program for 14 years, you were telling me. How do you, when you were a head coach, did you have like a goalie coach, or were you the one working with the goalies? Or if someone's like leading a program, how could they think about working the goalie, getting the goalies the right amount of training?
Yeah, I think, no matter what, if you're a Division-I head coach, or if you're, and I think you'll go, there are Division-I head coaches that are goalie coaches as well. Charlie Toomey's a perfect example.
Right.
It's just really hard to separate. It'd be like a head coach also being the offensive coordinator or the quarterback's coach. It's just, you need the tedious level of detail. When my first coaching job was at Notre Dame, Kevin Corrigan hired me, and he said, just goalies, just do the goalies. And I used to sit up at knees. I'd be on my knees on the goal line extended and just watch the goalie's feet. And that's a huge piece of goaltending. I just watch my goalie's feet. I had Chris Parent and Ryan Jewell and Pat Finn were my goalies, and I would just watch their feet. And as I was learning and training myself as a young goalie coach, I found that to be just, there's no way a head coach can take the time to just watch his goalie's feet all practice. So
right.
It's really important. Even now as an NAIA head coach, it's really important to have someone that can work with the goalies. You know, one of my goalies, Alex Cordero, played for me in his youth program here in Tampa, went to Wingate, was all conference at Wingate, and then left Wingate, and we picked him up off the waiver wire, if you will. And, you know, he's now at Weber, and he knows so much because I've trained him since he was in 8th grade. And so he knows everything that I'm going to say before I even say it. So it helps to have that kind of connection, but goalie coaches are so important. And in our True program, I've got four goalie coaches in just the True Tampa program. I've got a goalie coach at the 12U level. I've got one that works back and forth with the 14s. I've got, you know, a high school goalie coach, and then myself. So, you know, it's, you know, it's so important, you know, to have a goalie coach, and they're out there. Goalies are, you know, they're everywhere. So if someone's questioning whether they think they should or should not have a goalie coach, I would say, you know, that's probably going to be the most important investment you make besides a faceoff coach. Those two positions.
Well, yeah,
you know, it's hard to win without those two. So you need to have goalie coaches. And at Providence, when I had Ron Westgate, it was great. So I had a goalie coach who played for me, knew everything that I liked and wanted. But there were times also when we didn't have that luxury, and I would work with the goalies myself.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta have, maybe it's a little bit biased on a lacrosse goalie podcast, but you gotta have a goalie coach. I mean,
yeah, advocating for goalies to be employed. I love it.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, nothing else, like, you know, there's this whole mental side of the position, which we can talk about later. And like, if you don't have a coach, if you don't have somebody like there helping you, all of a sudden it's just, to me, it's way different than any other position. You know, you've got this whole mental side when you screw up. You got this whole, like, who do I lean on when I screw up?
Yeah.
Right.
And yes, and that is, you know what, you're touching on, I think, probably the most important piece of the goalie coach, especially in the college level. But to have that in between, because the head coach, everything the head coach says is really just carried with so much more weight. So this is a perfect example. When I was coaching at Notre Dame, Chris Parent was one of the goalies who I mentioned earlier. Chris was just having a day against Ohio Wesleyan. We back then we played some Division III teams, because in the Midwest you just took the games you could take. And you know, Chris is just, you know, we're beating Ohio Wesleyan, like, you know, 5-3 or something. I can't remember the score, but I mean, Chris is the only reason why we're winning the game. I mean, he's got like 17 saves, and he's just having a day, and he's actually asking for the ball to be shot at him during the game. Now, yeah, it's probably not good sportsmanship, but he's just having it. He's feeling it. So he's like, shoot, you know, no. And you know, Kev turns to me and he says, can you get him to stop, you know, talking to the other team or whatever, stop, whatever. Yeah. And I just kind of was like, yeah, I got it. And I just, you know, I'm like, I'm not saying a word to the kid. He's in his zone. I'm not going to break the zone.
Right.
But that filter between what the head coach wants and what the goalie needs to hear, and what the goalie needs sometimes, and the head coach is like, listen, I don't have time for all the psychology of it. I just need the ball not to go in the cage. Can we figure that out? Or I need the ball not to be thrown late up the field in the middle of the field for a turnover in the clear. Yeah. Can you get that done for me? And then the goalie coach can often kind of massage that message in a way to make it a little bit more palatable, a little more positive for the, you know, for the goalie. And I'm the same, you know, it's hard for my goalies because it's, you know, coming from the head coach. So when they turn the ball over, it's, you know, it's coming from me, and it's also the goalie coach. And at that moment, I'm not the goalie coach, I'm the head coach. And I'm like, listen, I just can't afford another clearing turnover. We got a shot to win here. Let's not give the ball back every time we make a save. But luckily for me, Cordero's good enough right now where if he throws it away, he's making another save,
those saves. Yeah. And the other thing too is, you know, it's like you said, there's a lot of goalies out there, you know, college kids in the area would, if they got the time, like, they would love to coach the youth. Like, there's probably some parents, you know, there's a lot of goalie coaching content on YouTube, on Instagram. Like, I put out a lot of stuff. Like, even if you've never played this sport, like, I guarantee you could learn it to a level to where you know what you're looking at, and you could be helpful.
Absolutely.
As a coach.
Parents, that's the thing. Parents also have to understand that when their goalie goes to a goalie camp, if you want to learn the position, be available, be there. Like when I that session you saw at the camp at Providence, that YouTube video, that ancient YouTube video that you pulled out, that is right in the stands, and behind the camera are the parents, and we do it right there because I want the parents to see what we're teaching. I want the parents to access it. Some coaches don't want the parents involved in everything. I'm one of those coaches that does. Like at true practices, I want my parents as close to the action as they get. I want them to hear everything they can. Part of it is because I want them to understand what we're saying. And so if their young player has a question later that they can answer, but also I want them to see the coaching going on, and I want them to appreciate it, that how hard the coaches work. And also as a control mechanism, if there's something I can't see and they see something that they don't think is being done the right way, I want the feedback, because I want to be able to provide feedback to my coaches and make sure my coaches are learning and they're growing and they're getting better. I don't subscribe to this feeling that parents and coaches are supposed to be separated. I feel like parent and coaches need to be on the same page so that the player can be held accountable, and the player has, a very generic and kind of inclusive resource to go to when they need help, to go to the parent or to the coach, and they're getting the same constant message from both. So that's maybe a little something that you grow into as you get a little older. I'm sure people watching this podcast that played for me in my earlier days as a coach and be like, yeah, that's not the way it was, coach. But you grow into who you are, and you start to develop, and you get older, and you start to really appreciate more than just, the coaching piece. That there's a lot more to this than just, the coaches and the players.
Yeah. What would you tell a goalie mom or dad that's sort of brand new to the position, and their kid just got into it?
Get them as much time with goalie coaches as you can. It's really important. I think any free clinics that, we have free clinics that we provide down here in the Tampa area.
Nice.
From True. We just did one at St. Pete. It was awesome. We had like 50 kids, and there was only 2 goalies there. And it's like, just why wouldn't you have a goalie coach? Let's get in front of the goalie coach, spend as much time. Private lessons, I know that they can get expensive, and I get that. But even just small groups, if you have a couple goalies and you can say, hey, goalie coach, well, can you cut us a break if we get you 3 goalies at once? Just doing whatever you can to get in front of, to get that work. Even in a program like True Tampa that has 4 goalie coaches, we still can't give the goalies enough attention. It's just because we need them in drills. We need them to develop their game savviness. We need them to develop, as we talked about, that live play, repetitions that are so important. But yeah, that's the most important piece of it is really that the time that they spend with goalie coaches and going to goalie specific camps. That's how I learned. I never had a goalie coach growing up in Central New York. I went to Cortland High School. Don King and John Spallone were my coaches, and they were awesome, but they weren't goalie specific. So I learned by going and working with these, I worked with Billy Pilot at random camps. I worked with, all these goalie coaches, and, that's how I learned how to play goalie.
Yeah. Same here. I mean, I played at Cal in the MCLA, and I learned from the starter, and we were out there. I mean, I just picked his brain on it, every single thing. And there wasn't much, this is 2003. So there wasn't the Chris Burdick famous YouTube video we've been referencing this entire show. But
video is getting a lot more credit than it deserves.
No, I'm telling you, it's great. Awesome. Yeah, love it. But anyway, my point was, there's a lot of resources out there, and to your point, take advantage of all of them. You mentioned
just things like this. This is awesome, Damon. I love this. Like this, the Lax Rat stuff, and getting content out for goalies, getting a place for goalies to go, listening to goalies talk. I mean, it's great. It's great stuff.
I love it. It's the best part of my day right here. You mentioned just watching the feet. For someone who's like, well, what am I looking for? How do you describe, what you're doing there?
Yeah, it's really easy. Again, on the timeline of the shot, you're looking for initiation. You're looking for step initiation. You want to make sure the step is not, that there's not a false step, that the initial step is in the direction of the shot. You're looking for line to the ball. You're looking to make sure that step is cutting the line of the shot off. So we talked about vertical 45, lateral stepping, trail stepping, and vectors. Making sure the trail step vector is going in the same direction as a lead step vector. So as those feet move, the body isn't turning away from the shooter. The other thing I think is really good is a lot of people don't realize this, but when the heel of the lead step hits the ground first, the body tends not to come through the save. And since the point of the lead step is to get the lead hand through the save, that's really what it's designed to do. If your lead step steps to the heel first, then your body stays behind the step. So you're not really, so now you're basically stepping and reaching, and the body's not moving. So it's really important when you watch those feet, how they land on the ground is going to give you the idea of whether you're heel stepping and your body's staying. And if you pause it when the heel touches the ground, you'll see the body hasn't moved, and it's just hand and foot throwing at the ball. versus if the lead step lands a little bit more towards the balls of the feet. I mean, it'll never be completely flat. It's going to always land a little heel first, but you can see the difference of how the body moves along with the step through the save. So, I mean, those are some of the things that I'm looking at when I look at the feet. And I think the feet tell me everything about the save I need to know.
Yeah. Love it. Is there anything, you mentioned, being maybe a little bit, call it old school in some of the tactics. Is there anything that you've heard from like a current goalie coach or something that you see goalies doing nowadays that you're like, no, I don't agree with that whatsoever?
I really, the positioning one is the one that gets me the worst. Goalies, when the ball's behind and the goalies are on the pipe and playing flat like a hockey goalie does when the puck's behind the net, it just doesn't make any sense to me. If a player is in a feeding position, then my defense in front of the cage has got to play strong one side or the other. And since the most dangerous cut is a front cut, I want my defenders to kind of shield and shed we call the shed. It's a Notre Dame term, shedding your man, but we want to shed ball side. So when I'm calling back right, I want my player to be on the right-hand side of that attacker on the crease. That means he's susceptible to a back cut to the back pipe. So as a goalie, I'd prefer to have my goalie play backside pivot position is what we call it, where he's playing the weak side feed and opposite feed the front side. Yeah, he's kind of opposite, but he's not, it's not a reverse arc. He's just from point of center, he's on the backside of line of center. Okay. And then basically if the feed comes to the front side, he's going to pivot and pivot and close the door on that front side feed. But also if the feed goes to the back pipe, he can pivot on the other foot. Yeah. It's like a two swing and hinge. He can pivot to get to that, but he has to be able to take away that feed to the back pipe, to that cutter to the back pipe. So my defense can play heavy ball side. And that's one of the things I really don't like that goalies, that people teach is, and also on the pipe being kind of angled instead of being square with the shooter. Like I said, I want to be square with the shooter while he's a shooter coming around the net. And then as he starts to come, I'll pivot so my foot never leaves the pipe, but that'll help me stay flat with him and create more ability. I don't know if you saw the save that Phipps made in the Denver game in 2020, when I forget who it was, comes up underneath the goal line, what we call an ugly dodge, UGLE, up the goal line extended, and basically dives across, and Fipper gets really flat and basically just steps lateral across the goal mouth and makes a save. It's the best save I've ever seen in my entire life, with the exception of Quint Kesinich's cross cage diving save in one of the Final Fours that he made, which was literally the best save ever. If anybody wants to argue that that wasn't the best save ever, then, show it to me.
We can debate. I got some good options.
Kessinich had a diving cross cage save in maybe a championship game or a semifinal. I forget who was against Cornell. I don't even remember. But I remember as a kid growing up seeing that save and being like, wow, because I was a Larry Quinn guy, and I'm like, yeah, Kessinich is great, but I'm a Larry Quinn guy. I was a Tom Sears. That's Tom Sears right here. Yeah, that's Tom Sears from Carolina. He was my guy. That was my guy. That's the guy I grew up watching. But and Peter Sheehan from Virginia, those guys were my guys. But I mean, the positioning on the pipe to make yourself smaller. And we used to battle back and forth. Nico Amato and I battle about it. And I'd say, Nico, you got to be square when this guy's wrapping, coming around the cage. And, those are some of the things that I kind of, I don't really, save technique wise. There's, the quick circle and the gas pedal and steering wheel. Coach Galloway. I mean, it all makes sense. He's a fantastic goaltender. I don't have any problem with goalies learning that stuff. But I just think that the idea of the lead hand getting straight to the ball, you can't argue that kind of logic. It's the straightest path between two distance. The quickest way to get somewhere is in a straight line. So as long as your top hand is driving to where it needs to go, I think everything else, the steering wheel concept is about really wrist rotation. And we're already covering that a little bit in what we teach, but I don't think there's a wrong way to play goaltending, to play goalie. I think there's just, what are you gaining and what are you giving up? Everything you do in the cage is about, Doc used to just basically step off his line. Hopkins guys coming down the alley, and Doc would just step off his line and take the far pipe away, and they'd shoot the ball right at him, and he'd just get hit. Just smarter than the shooters. You know what I mean? I mean, that's just the way he was. A really gifted mental goalie. He would mess with shooters' minds. He would just drive them crazy because he would be out thinking them. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, but you need to understand when you put a technique in, what is the advantage, what are you gaining, And what are you giving up? It's like a 10-man ride. Yeah, you're gaining pressure on the ball, but your cage is exposed. So if you don't do the pressure on the ball part right, then you have to deal with the consequence of the cage being exposed.
Yep. Yeah. I usually ask what goalies did you learn from, or, some of the guys you like to watch growing up. You mentioned a bunch right there. Did we get them all, or are there some other goalies?
Jim Braun, I have to give a shout out to Jimmy Braun, Cortland State, where I grew up. I was a ball boy for Cortland State. Jerry DeMayo gave me a Long Island guy gave me a great nickname. He called me the can't say the word, the bleeping ball fetcher. He's like, ball boy's too light. He's like, let's give you a tough name. But Jimmy Braun gave me my first goalie stick. And I remember we played Ithaca one year at Chugger Davis Field in Cortland. And we lost, I think, in overtime to Ithaca. And I broke the stick along the goalpost, the football goalpost, because I was so upset.
Yeah.
But and I was devastated by it. But that was my first goalie stick. And but Jimmy used to turn when they played teams, they would be way up on. He would turn and have a catch with me during the game. And he'd just be like, tell me when they're coming. And he
from the sideline.
No, I would be behind the cage as the ball boy, and he'd turn.
Got it.
Yeah. Catch with me.
Yeah.
And he'd just tell me, let me know when they're coming. And he would never look. He would trust me as a 8-year-old 100% that I was going to tell him, here they come. And but and that's, he was the guy that started goaltending for me. When I was at Delaware, we had a couple games where we got up big on people. I mean, we weren't the same level of what DeLuca's team is right now. But I had a ball boy that I turned and I had catches with when I was the starting goalie at Delaware.
It's a good move.
Pay that forward. But yeah, Jimmy Braun has to go down as the guy. He's the guy that really, got me into it. My father was a history professor at Cortland State, so I'd go over and I went to grade school on the campus. So I'd walk down to practice and hang out with the team and do all that, and that was so much fun.
Yeah.
But Tom Sears was my first real the guy. I was Tom Sears all the way, Carolina. And I saw him play live at Loyola once, and I was just awestruck by him. But I've loved watching, like I said, Larry Quinn Kastanich. I watched all the Q's goalies growing up. Nims was one that I loved because he was so different than me. His technique was so different. And then I grew up playing against Matty Powell. We were in the same conference, and so I've always enjoyed watching Matty play in his football pants, and he ended up doing some of our games as a ref, and it was pretty fun. Just connected with Matty, and so there's just so many great goalies. It's hard. Peter Sheehan. When I started opposite Peter Sheehan at Delaware, we played at Hofstra. He was with Virginia. I just was like, it was that moment, like when you're going up against Tom Brady as a rookie quarterback, you're just like, wow, that's Peter Sheehan's in the other net. So it was,
Love it.
It's you can't, that's why you want so many kids to have the opportunity to play college lacrosse, because God, the things that you get out of it, the memories and things you don't even remember are just so phenomenal. They're so great.
100% agree with that. I mean, I just have the best memories of, stretching, pre-practice stretching with the team and BSing around, and it's just so much fun. What was it about the goalie position for you that, made you really stick with it?
Well, I wanted to be a goalie growing up, but I was really good. I was a really good stick handler and midfielder, and I ran a lot as a goalie. I was constantly out. So I would play goalie all summer, and then I'd come back, and then we had Richie Barnes, outstanding goalie for Cortland State, and then went back and won a national championship coaching Cortland State. So Richie would be the senior. I was a sophomore, so I would be Richie's backup, but they wanted me to play midfield, and I'd play midfield. And then finally, my junior year, I got a chance to start, and I got a chance to play. But I thought the coolest thing watching Nizlowski for Rutgers, he's another guy. Watching him go coast to coast and watching, Beardmore and those guys, I loved running out of the cage. I thought the hardest thing to do in the game of lacrosse is scoring as a goalie. And that was my thing. I was like, I'm going to score as a goalie. And as bad as that sounds, is the reason why I wanted to play the position. That was the reason. And so my high school, I was able to get upfield on, Nottingham High School one time, got upfield and got one. And then I got two in college, one against Yale and one against Lehigh. And it's an emotional spark,
Sure.
The goal. It's one of those things, especially when you're running up the field, shooting on the run. Like I'm going left-handed shooting on the run. I'm not just, I had a goalie, Christian Zalewski scored against Brown against a 10-man. And when I was at Providence and it made ESPN, I sent it in and it got on TV. And Christian actually played for me this summer with the Polish national. But it's a different feeling being able to hit from like 3/4 field, but running down the field like a midfielder. Guys go over your head.
Right.
They're going to take the ball away from you, and then the next thing you know, you're sticking one on the run, and they're like, "Wait, what was that?" But
changes the whole momentum of the game.
That's what it was. I wanted to run, and I could handle really well. It was good. A lot of guys that played with me at Delaware probably argue I wasn't that good in the cage saving the ball, and they're probably right. I think one of them once said to me, I think I read NCAA approved on the ball as it went by me. It was moving so slow. Burdick, what are you doing? MB Whitlow probably.
Yeah.
But I'd make up for it by stealing a pass, getting a ground ball, getting the ball off the field.
Yeah. So you started, we kind of brushed over your career a little bit, 14 years Providence, coached with the Polish national team. But now you've started up a new program at Weber, which is what you're telling me before we hit record. And you're saying the beauty of it is I can create a culture from zero. I can create it, exactly what I want. Like the question for you is what do you want? Like, what do you try to build as a culture?
The hardest thing to be, being in the position of starting a program is I don't want to dictate culture. I think it's fake. I think that coaches tell you this is what we are. And the players, oh yeah, that's what we are. And then the players just go off and do what they do. So the hardest part about building the culture and what we want to build at Weber is I want a true culture. I want the culture to actually, culture is shared belief and behavior. Too many people think culture is belief, and this is what we intend to do, and that's not what true culture is. True culture is the actual actions of the group. So that is the thing that I think really separates what we're doing at Weber from anything I've been part of in the past, and that is it's I'm not dictating culture. The culture is shared belief and shared behaviors of our entire organization, and so when I'm there to steer the ship. If guys are off page, I'll say, hey guys, is this really, the direction that you want to go as an individual, as an athlete? How's this contributing to what we do? But I think if you ask our players, that's the thing they're going to tell you. They're like, yeah, it was like a rough first year sometimes because they kind of didn't really understand that coach was basically mandating that they establish the culture. And now that we are starting to get it and we're starting to do it, and the kids are all understanding now that non-dictative culture, especially in today's world, I think is just head and shoulders the way to do stuff. I don't fight our guys on stuff. I don't have to fight them to go to class. I don't have to argue with them over, this, that, or another. They want to do the stuff that they know they need to do to be successful. And it's a great environment to play in because you never have to play off of fear. You're never worried that coach is going to come down on you, or in fact, that no matter what happens, that your coaches are going to be there for you and help you through whatever your problems are. Now, granted, there's certain things that are non-negotiable, and that's going to be in any organization. But we don't bounce off of those things. Kids aren't trying to double talk or say one thing, do another. Because they understand how important culture is to their own behavior. Right. So that's really the big thing that we're trying to get built at Weber is that true reflection. That culture is a true reflection of what we do and who we are. And I think that anybody in the organization can contribute. And that's what we want to do. We want anybody in the organization to contribute to the culture so that it's not just coming from coaches. It's not just coming from the senior class. You ever hear people say, oh, we had bad senior leadership? That doesn't fly with me. I don't believe in that. I think that, you as a coach, it's your job to create the culture. And so for me, my guys know that they have 100% ownership. And so when you have that, you can't let anybody down. You have to do the right thing because you can't allow, you can't allow your actions to be the thing that let everybody down.
Cool. Hold on a second. I was just telling Evan works for me. We were supposed to have a call right now, but I'm going to tell him we're wrapping up soon. Hang on a second.
I thought you were bringing in one of my players there. To
right. Yeah.
Ask about my culture talk.
Yeah, be like, gotcha. Here is a guy from your team.
You know how it is. They can't point to a rule. They can't say, oh yeah, coach said this rule, so now I can get around it by doing this. I'm like, listen, the rules are to do everything at the championship level, and don't do anything that's going to impact the image of our organization. Those are two easy things, two theories that they have to follow. And then from there, they have to understand what that is. So if you don't go to class, you're representing the program in a bad image. You're hurting our opportunities to be eligible, as a player. Like those are the things we really need them to understand. I don't need them to look at a rule book and say, oh, well, I can get around this rule or I can get around that rule. Kids know what's right and wrong. I mean, I think
yeah, I've never coached
like always do the right thing, and I feel like that's part of it.
Yeah, I've never coached a program like that, so I was just kind of like, processing kind of what you said in my head. But if I'm a head coach of a program and I want to institute like a culture of winning, right? Which basically means like, if we do not win, like I kind of need to see what the team is doing, right? Like if they're upset, like if they're, if they're, feeling it, then great. Like, then that's the direct, like you said, I'm in charge of the ship. Right. But if they're like, nah, we didn't win. All right, that's fine. You know what I mean? Like if that's the attitude, then you as a head coach need to like direct the ship.
That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen where we are. And it doesn't happen a lot of places. I think that maybe the best answer is process is more important than results, especially when you're building process. If the process is doing everything the correct way, then what you're going to get out of it is, it just doesn't make any sense to have results be what you drive your organization. Because then what happens when you're the Seattle Seahawks and you're 3-7? At 3-7, that team could possibly go 9-7 and still make the playoffs. But if it's all about winning, then you don't have the culture really to come back from 3-7 because guys are jumping off the ship. So I think that the guys understanding that the game's bigger than winning and losing is something that's really important to me. And that's my message to them all the time. This has got to be bigger than winning and losing. At some point, some way, like you talk about the memories of just stretching or the bus rides, like when we travel at Weber, we travel really light. Like it is like guys can't wait to travel because we have a blast when we travel. It's, my philosophy with the guys is no one's ever won a game on the way to the game and no one's ever won a game after the game's played. So don't let the outcome of the game is not going to affect our time together and our ability to enjoy a 3.5. I mean, we have to travel a lot to get the games. There's only 2 NAIA teams in Florida. So, I want our guys to love traveling. I want our guys to love going. Like the kids don't miss practices. They want to be at practice. Like we had our last week of practice this past week and guys are like, begging the trainer to let them practice because they got injuries and stuff. I mean, I've never been part of that. So I think whatever we're doing, I just know I enjoyed a lot more. I know the kids enjoyed a lot more. I'm hoping that the talent is good enough so that we can win games and they can get some reward for their efforts. And I feel like we're getting there. We've got an unbelievable group of guys in our second year here, and we're still building. We're still bringing transfers in. So, we'll see where it goes. I mean, it could be missing the mark here, but, I think if kids believe that what they're doing is what the value is, then they're going to try to do the right thing.
Love it. Well, Coach, thank you so much for coming on. We could probably talk for another 2 or 3 hours. But
I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is not the Joe Rogan.
Hey, I saw this YouTube video. What's up?
Yeah, I don't do the Joe Rogan 3 to 4 hour podcast. So we'll wrap it up right there. But if you had to leave the goalies with the final piece of advice, what would you tell them?
I think the most important thing is that you have to be the example. You're the guy that needs to lead by example. You have to be the hardest worker on the field. You have to be the most engaged guy off the field. For the upper class, the high school and the college guys, your academic level needs to be there. You need to be someone that everybody can count on. For the younger guys, not showing up at practice as a young goalie can really impact the way practice goes. So you have to be committed. You have to be there. You have to be 100% engaged in it. Those are the most important pieces. They're the intangible pieces of leadership that really, I think the goaltending position is about. And if you hit those on, if you're on that, then you're going to bring value to your organization, no matter what, if you're a starter, backup, anything, you're adding value to what you do. And that's, as a player, that's what you want to do. You want to add value to the deal.
Love it. Coach, thank you so much.
All right, brother. Thanks, Damon.